Hey everybody, Dave Kincaid here with Alberta Business Grants, and we've got a special guest for you today, Craig Gorham, who's an expert in financial projections, budgeting, forecasting. So first of all, Craig, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh,
Appreciate
no
it.
worries. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, the reason we have Craig with us today is every grant application, every major grant application, there's a question about pro formas. And almost, I would say, of the 100 entrepreneurs out of 100 entrepreneurs I'll talk to, I'd say one at my stage of grant writing will have it done.
Right.
And I'm a word guy.
Yep.
Excel was never my thing. And then
Oh.
I was working with Craig on a project and I saw his pro formas and they were phenomenal. So
And I am almost the opposite, David. For me, it's like, if you've seen The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Everyone sees like the numbers. When I look at Excel, like I don't see the numbers anymore. I see like the businesses and the operations behind them. So it comes from a different background for sure.
Totally. And it's a big thing. When people are writing grants, it's so many different skills. It's project management, it's market research, it's writing what's your value proposition. But this finance piece is one that, I find either the person's really good at or they need help. So
yeah,
I thought we'd just keep it really high level today.
Sure.
And, if you're listening to this video, we're trying to help you understand what a pro forma is, what you need to have it in place, when's it started, all that kind of stuff. So I think it'll be very helpful. So Craig, let's just start it with something real basic. And while you're talking, I'm going to share the screen from Alberta Innovates. And the question is, why don't you talk to us what a pro forma is?
Sure. Well, I'll give you a quick background on myself as well. To start off here. So my background is finance. So I graduated with a commerce degree focused in finance. I've worked in investment banking, equity research, like a lot of the hardcore finance type jobs, business development for a oil and gas company. And I was manager of financial modeling for a company that had, over $18 billion a year in revenue. So I've had the experience working with like big numbers, big clients, and doing the modeling for them. But I also have a background as an entrepreneur. And I had started my own company. I had 23 people working for me. I've kind of been on that side of the coin as well, where it's like, you're the last stop, the buck stops here, and you're the one responsible for making everything happen. So I can really sympathize and empathize with entrepreneurs who are doing that side of it as well, because I've had those sleepless nights. Education-wise, I do have it. I'm a chartered financial analyst. I've earned a financial modeling and valuation analyst accreditation. So I do like to stay on top of these kind of things as well.
And you love Excel.
I do. I have a YouTube channel where I train on Excel. Spending 10 hours a day in Excel for me is not punishment. It kind of feels like home.
Yeah. Okay. For me, opening Excel, it can be like, oh boy, here we go.
No worries.
So why don't we start with maybe even before we jump into a pro forma, just off to say, why is it so few people, in my experience, get these done or have them? Like when they call, they don't have them.
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think that kind of numeric skill set is rare. I think a lot of people come from an area where they have operational experience or a passion. And unsurprisingly, Excel and finance is not a super common passion. I think when you read about education and where people struggle is the math side of it. So it's easy to like focus on kind of the squishy, the touchy-feely aspects of running a business and not worry so much about the numbers. Until you find you need someone else's money. And then all of a sudden they are really focused on the numbers side of it. And kind of the operational, tangible things is not necessarily their primary concern. I think most people don't want to start a business or expand a business because they want to do more Excel. I mean, they like getting the numbers in their bank account at the end of the day, but it's operating the business that excites them, not just looking at the spreadsheet about the business.
Yeah, so true. So let's get into, I'm going to share my screen here, and I want people to see, this is an Alberta Innovates question about financial projections and pro forma statements. So what is a pro forma? Let's start really simple.
Sure. So boiled down, it's a projection of your firm, or if it's an existing firm, the project's financial performance into the future. So that's, I'm not going to say the Latin is there, but when I think of a pro forma, the pro is a projection. So we're trying to estimate what's going to be happening 3 to 5 years into the future. The forma side of it is making sure that we're preparing that in a way that makes it simple for an outsider or someone who doesn't really understand the operations of your business. But it allows them to compare against other firms or projects that are operating in unrelated industries. So if you have a software company, when your pro forma is completed, it should be recognizable to someone who's never looked at a software company before, but might have looked at an oil and gas company or a manufacturing company. And so what a pro forma should do is provide 3 key areas of insight. The first thing it needs to do is to determine and help demonstrate if the idea or the project is financially viable. So will the estimated revenues be sufficient to exceed the direct and indirect costs of carrying on the business? Then if it is viable, how much cash is the project or business going to be required in order to get it started before operational break even? So, one of the tricky things in here is just making sure we can take a look at all the cash needs. It's easy to understand, I have to buy equipment or I have to buy a piece of software, but sometimes there's what we call working capital issues as well, or the cash cycle, which also need to be concerned. Will give an entrepreneur the idea of if they already have sufficient funds in order to start the business. And if not, it gives them an idea of how much money that they're going to need to seek from outsiders or from third parties.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So the third thing that it should help do is help determine if there's going to be an economic return. So getting a financial return where your money comes back is great. What a lot of investors are going to care more about is if the amount of cash that's returned is going to be sufficient to justify the risk of the project. So that's you're starting to figure out rates of return, net present values, and get an idea of what the project is worth today versus what it's going to be worth 3 years or 5 years into the future. So now the part that I think a lot of entrepreneurs like the best is they get to see an idea at that point of what the project is worth to them or to the ownership group of the company versus how much of that value is going to flow to outsiders.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Craig. And I think the next question I wanted to ask you is the timing of when to start a pro forma in the business plan, because obviously you're thinking through the problem, what you're going to do, you're writing a plan. Yep. So when is the best time that, okay, let's begin the pro forma in the business plan process?
Sure. Well, I think, the good news is that most entrepreneurs have already started a pro forma. They may not realize that and may not have called it that, but I haven't met many entrepreneurs who get excited about an idea that they think is going to lose money. So if you already have an idea that you're going to make some money, you've already started your pro forma. Now, it's maybe more pro and projection than formalized at that point, but a pro forma can be done on a napkin. They talk about back of the napkin calculations. That's a pro forma. By moving those into Excel or a spreadsheet, that just lets us do a bunch of pro formas in a short period of time. But the accuracy isn't necessarily any greater than what's done on the back of a napkin. So I think what's maybe more challenging and intimidating is trying to translate that initial idea that, this is going to make some money into a format that someone who doesn't understand the business is going to be able to see as well.
I think that's really encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people are probably closer to it than they realize. It's just trying to get it more formalized. And the nice thing with a business plan is that a pro forma and a business plan kind of go hand in hand. A lot of the things that you're going to be talking about in your business plan are also going to be in your pro forma. So it is something that's going to be working together. Business plan, you want to talk about where your revenue is going to come from. How much will you be selling? What will you be selling for? how will you drive business? Well, you'll be marketing, you'll be trying to identify what your cost centers are. And essentially that's what your pro forma is. It's an idea of this is how much money we're going to make. And then beneath that, we put these are the things that are going to cost us in order to earn that money.
I love that. And I like the idea of it goes along in tandem with the business plan writing, because I know on the writing side, as you start doing market research, for example, you realize, oh, there's a competitor that does it this way and this is their pricing. And then you're like, what's my pricing model? This is an ongoing process. And coming back to the pro forma the whole time through that journey makes so much sense. I also like the napkin part, because
for sure
we can all relate to that.
Absolutely. And I'm the weirdo. I do it backwards. I mean, I'll do a financial 5-year projection, and then I'll take that and then I build a business plan out of it. But that's just because what my comfort level is, what my background is. I wouldn't expect more than 5% of other entrepreneurs out there to start with the numbers and then go into the business plan. It's as you're working through the business plan, you're identifying the key drivers that are going to cause success and challenge for your company. All the pro forma is doing is taking those opportunities and those risks and just translating them into some numbers.
Yeah, and I mean, I wish I could have done that when I started my business. I got a pro forma later, and it brought me so much peace, because you kind of just have a sense like, oh, I know this is going to be a down month because I'm getting work done, and then it'll come back up. So,
right.
It's just, they're so necessary, and but so few people have them. It's really amazing.
Well, it gets people thinking about those things like seasonality. I'm going to have a slow time, and I shouldn't panic when I'm operating my business and that slow time comes, because I've already looked ahead and seen that, oh yeah, July through September, going to be slow for me, but I'm going to be really busy in a different quarter. So those are all types of things that the discipline involved in creating your pro forma helps an entrepreneur recognize.
So let's do a little case study for a second.
Sure.
Let's say there's an entrepreneur listening out there. They've started their business, or it's kind of working, or just their pre-revenue, it's coming along, and their books are kind of non-existent or really messy, or where I'm kind of going with this. Like, what do they need to have in place to start putting together a high quality pro forma?
Sure. Well, again, the good news here is that most pro formas are done without a lot of historical financial information. I mean, if you're an established company and you're doing what you've been doing the last 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years, I mean, a pro forma is really just taking a look at those numbers and just increasing them a little bit every year into the future. I mean, while that may be called a pro forma, I mean, that's not, in my opinion, like a true pro forma. Most pro formas are either someone starting a new business, or in a company, they are starting a new capital project. So they're starting a new line of business. And so there isn't a lot of historical information. So if that's where the entrepreneur's at, that's completely normal. And so they shouldn't feel like, oh, I don't have an audited financial statement or 3 years of historic. That's A-okay. That's not what a pro forma is about. So, most are needed, like I said, because it is a new business. And so with that, you are using assumptions. And what people will be evaluating is not necessarily just the accuracy of your assumptions, but more, are they reasonable? Are they present? When I look at a pro forma, I'm like, oh, did they think to add advertising, right? I mean, they have all this idea of selling all this stuff, but they haven't put any estimate into how much it's going to cost them to find that business.
Yeah.
So
those assumptions come up in grant applications all the time.
Yeah.
Like, what are they? Have you thought them through? Have you wrote them down? And you have to include them. And
yes. Well, and that's where sometimes an outside expert can help, because an ideal pro forma is like finding that optimum position where you want to have sufficient data, but not too much, because otherwise it gets really unweighty, difficult to manage if you have too much detail in it. So it's that right level of detail.
And I want to talk about the people involved, because I think for a lot of entrepreneurs out there, in my experience, and having gone through this building my own business, it's like, okay, there's bookkeepers, there's accountants, then there's financial analysts, and there's all these different bodies of people. Then who are the people, an entrepreneur kind of starting to grow his business on the financial side to
Sure.
build a pro forma, who should be involved in that?
So, ideally, the type of role that you're looking for is a financial analyst. So typically, someone who's a financial analyst is used to taking assumptions about current business and trying to forecast those assumptions into the future. Now, an accountant or a bookkeeper, a lot of them are certainly capable of preparing a pro forma. And I don't want to say too much before the accountants all send me hate mail, but most accountants are based upon looking at how the business is acting currently and reporting on how it's performed in the past.
Yes.
And then their expertise isn't as much into trying to forecast and risk opportunities into the future. Although a lot of them do have that skill, but it isn't necessarily as common as you see it in those who have a finance or a financial analyst type background.
And I'll add to that, actually, Craig. In my experience, I've had a great accountant, and they are 90% backward looking. That's what they do all the day, right? They're trying to get deadlines, and they definitely have probably the skill to move forward.
Yep.
But it is a different skill, and this is what I've learned is this person who's very forward thinking, has a business background, can ask good questions, has entrepreneurial experience. Now,
I think the other benefit they can bring to is a lot of them have worked with investors as well. And so they have a lot of fluency understanding what investors are looking for, and what types of things that they like to see. And so that kind of comes from experience.
Yeah, and a financial analyst can do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's, for me, I'm glad you clarified that, because I've had people say, it's your bookkeeper, it's your accountant, it's so-and-so, it's a consultant that's done one before. And when I saw your pro forma, I was blown away. Or the pro forma that, what project we were working on, I was like, wow, that's a whole different level. I mean, to be able to have the skill to change a couple of cells and, just get so accurate and easily move timelines and make it readable. There's a reason why grant agencies ask them, and you can reduce risk of your application to a grant agency with a very well thought out pro forma.
Absolutely.
And they get better. The expectations on them, I've noticed, Craig, have gone up over the years. It used to be just like one sheet, don't worry about it.
Right. That napkin.
That napkin, yeah. But now the expectation is much higher.
Excellent. I mean, and again, as the grant process becomes more competitive, right? I mean, two people may have a great idea, but if one can demonstrate the financial soundness of it, they're certainly going to have an advantage in those competitive type situations.
For sure. And I'd also like to ask you about, this is a common situation. So the entrepreneur is maybe really good at selling widgets. They're not, Excel isn't their gift. So they're like, well, but they can do Excel a little bit. So they're debating, do I outsource it or do I do it in-house? Do you want to comment about that? Maybe some of the pros and cons of each, or what you would recommend?
I'm a big believer in core competencies. Both like individual, but also corporately. And so, in my education and some of my consulting work, I mean, I've always encouraged companies to focus on what they're good at, because it is tempting to think, well, geez, I'm a pretty good gardener, right? But it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for me to try and grow my own food. I mean, really and truly, I'm better to be a finance guy and buy my food from the grocery store, from people who are exceptional at growing and distributing food. And I think it's the same thing with an entrepreneur. I've never met an entrepreneur who's told me that I have too much time on my hands and I'd really like something else to do. Usually it's the opposite, where it's like, the business is going awesome and I'm running as fast as I can and I don't have any time to do this other stuff. By allowing an entrepreneur to focus on what their passion is, what they're good at, and what's most profitable for them is the other way than an external consultant or financial analyst can really help them out. I'm in a position where I can do in an afternoon, I can get an entrepreneur further ahead than a month of their own efforts. Frankly, most financial analysts, I can do more in an afternoon than they can do in a week. but that's just because I've been at it for so long and I've spent so much effort, honing that craft. And I don't expect an entrepreneur to take one of my online Excel courses to start coming up to speed. They're better growing their business, helping their customers out than trying to do what I do.
I wanted to add also to that, just as I've noticed over the years working with different entrepreneurs, having a long-term relationship with a great vendor who's really good at something. Like some of the successful entrepreneurs I work with for years and years and years, when they find a good vendor, they hang on to that vendor as their business.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
if you're
well, and I can also say that, David, I'm a client of yours, and that's why we engaged you, because we recognize that it's far wiser for us to let you do what you're good at than for me to try and understand how to be good at what you do. I'll let me be me, you do you, and I think that's the same for most entrepreneurs. Is they need to do what they do well and focus on that.
And just so, if someone is deciding to engage yourself or a financial analyst, is it in terms of budgeting? What do you recommend? Hourly or fixed price, like to get started? Just in general, what's the better process, do you find?
I think for most experienced analysts, they'd probably be doing things on a project base, or kind of like a standard project. And then if you need a significant amount of customization, it might be hourly after that. Hourly can work, but I find often people who are billing hourly are kind of also learning as they go. Once they know what they're doing, they have a really good idea of what the value of it is and how much time it's going to take them.
They do. I find entrepreneurs, I love that, Craig, because a flat fee, an entrepreneur say, okay, I'm going to get this. I'm here. I'm going to get this. It's going to cost this much. It's going to be really good. And it's done. I think for someone listening, that's really a great expectation. It's fair.
Well, and because of the formal aspect of a pro forma, because it's so similar, it really is. I can give a new business an idea of like, all right, this is what it's going to cost. This is how long it'll take me. And this is what I'm going to deliver to you at the end of it. Now, at the end of it, there may be additional work that the entrepreneur wants to be done. And then those kind of things get talked about on maybe an hourly type basis. But from the time you start to here's your pro forma ready to submit, I can tell you or an entrepreneur really quickly how long it'll take and when it will be ready for them.
Yeah. And I just wanted to just give you a shout out, Craig. If you're out there and you're looking to someone, I brought Craig on here for a reason. He's incredible at this. So by all means, reach out to him. How would people find you, Craig, if in your YouTube channel for people that want to just learn about it?
Yeah. If you can't sleep at night, I've got a YouTube channel that does Excel training. Now, most of that training is geared towards people who are trying to earn a specific accreditation. So it maybe isn't all that applicable for like a new Excel user. But I am available to be reached through my website, which is Carshalton Advisory. And rather than spell it, we'll put it in the notes to the video, or maybe David can pop it up on screen. But get started at Carshalton Advisory is the best email address to get in touch with me at. I have no problems talking with entrepreneurs or business owners. And on my website, I actually have a booking form where if people want an hour of my time, I'm more than willing to help give them a little bit of advice.
And the final tip I want to leave you for those watching the video, because I teach grants, you want to engage someone like Craig really early in your process, because, if the grant's going to take you 6 weeks to put together your first draft or 2 months, you don't want to wait till the 7th week and try to get it done at the last minute. Start early, get a draft done, and then you can update it throughout. And I think it'll just dramatically improve your process.
Absolutely. Well, and a good financial analyst should be showing the business owner, the entrepreneur, things that they've missed or things that they need to focus more upon. So again, we don't want to leave it too late, because if they're earning their money, they're going to be saying, oh, here's something you can change that's going to add more value to your pro forma, or here's something we could talk less about, and then you have more time to focus on more important things as well.
Right on. Craig, thanks so much for coming on. This has been awesome, and I know our listeners are going to get a lot a lot of value at it. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me, David.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks.